Imagine standing in a freezing trench in 1635. The mud around your boots is thick with frost and blood. You are surrounded by thousands of mercenaries, yet your gaze is fixed on a single detail: a strip of coarse, blood-red fabric knotted around the throat of the soldier beside you. It is not armor. It will not stop a musket ball, a rapier, or a bayonet. In fact, if an enemy catches hold of it in close quarters combat, it becomes the perfect handle to snap your spine. Yet men willingly tied this strip of cloth around their necks before walking into a meat grinder. Why? Because this single piece of fabric wasn't designed to save a life. It was designed to claim absolute psychological dominance over anyone who looked at it. This is the deadly, unexpected, and completely absurd origin of the item hanging in millions of closets right now, the necktie. Welcome back to where it began. Look at your closet. You've probably accepted the necktie as an innocent, boring piece of corporate armor. You wear it to job interviews, weddings, and funerals. You think it's just a useless strip of silk designed to keep your collar shut. You couldn't be more wrong. Over the next 12 minutes, we are tearing down the velvet curtain. You will uncover how a brutal mercenary dress code was weaponized by a paranoid French king to control his rebellious nobility. You will see how a cutthroat patent war in 1920s New York turned a simple garment into a multi-billion-dollar psychological weapon. And finally, you will discover the terrifying secret reason why global elite secret societies still force their members to wear this exact knot today. Lock in, because after today, you will never look at your neck the same way again. To understand how this stranglehold began, we have to travel back over 2,000 years before the modern boardroom was ever built. We begin in the scorching, dusty plains of Xi'an, China, in the year 210 BC. The first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, was obsessed with immortality. He was so terrified of the afterlife that he commissioned an army of over 8,000 life-size terracotta warriors to guard his tomb. When archaeologists excavated these clay soldiers in 1974, they noticed a strange, uniform detail. Every single high-ranking officer wore a wrapped cloth tied neatly around their throat. These weren't decorative ascots. In the harsh, dust-choked desert winds of northern China, these silk wraps served a vital survival purpose, keeping biting wind, sand, and sweat out of a warrior's armor joints. But notice the distinction. Only the elite officers wore them. The common foot soldiers were left exposed to the elements. From its very birth, the neck wrap was not a functional tool for the masses. It was a visible badge of rank, authority, and control. Fast forward 3 centuries to the humid, iron-scented air of the Roman Empire in 113 AD. Look closely at Trajan's column in Rome. Roman legionnaires are carved wearing a cloth wrap known as the focale. The air in Western Europe was freezing to a Roman soldier used to the Mediterranean sun. The focale was soaked in cold water to cool a soldier down during summer marches, or pulled tight over the throat to protect the larynx from raw armor straps in winter. Constructed from coarse wool, rough flax, or raw hemp, these early neckbands were far from luxurious. They smelled of sweat, horse grease, and wood smoke. Yet the psychological mechanics were already etched into human culture. Wrap the neck, hide the vulnerability of the throat, and project absolute discipline. But these primitive ancestors were still purely utilitarian. It would take a devastating, continent-spanning war in the 17th century to transform this rough, thermal wrap into an international obsession. By 1630, Europe was tearing itself apart in the 30 Years' War, a brutal conflict of religion, territory, and imperial dominance. To bolster his army, King Louis XIII of France hired thousands of mercenary fighters from the Croatian military frontier. When these Croatian units arrived in Paris, they brought a bizarre, striking piece of attire, a bright, knotted neck scarf made of coarse linen for common troops, and fine silk for high-ranking officers. The French referred to these mercenaries as the cravates. The visual impact on the opulent French court was immediate and intoxicating. The young French heir, who would become King Louis XIV, the Sun King, was obsessed with the style. To the French aristocracy, the Croatian wrap didn't just look exotic, it projected an aura of ruthless, battle-hardened masculinity. Louis XIV took the Croatian cravat, upgraded it with fine Venetian lace and gold thread, and made it mandatory royal attire. If you wanted to speak to the king, your neck had to be wrapped. Notice how fast the geopolitical virus spread. Across the English Channel, King Charles II saw the trend while in exile in France. When he reclaimed the English throne in 1660, he brought the cravat directly to London, spending massive sums of public money on single silk neck pieces. Meanwhile, on the other side of the planet, isolated empires like Tokugawa-era Japan viewed European neckwear with intense suspicion. While Western aristocrats used the cravat to flaunt excess, Eastern cultures saw it as an absurd, restrictive leash that restricted physical movement. Yet as Western naval empires expanded their trade routes by force, the necktie was no longer just fashion. It was the global uniform of imperial diplomacy. Adopt the necktie, or be labeled a barbarian. By the 19th century, the extravagant hand-laced cravat was facing a major crisis. It took over 30 minutes to tie, required constant starching, and was completely useless for the rising working class of the Industrial Revolution. The necktie was about to undergo 3 massive evolutionary shocks. Enter George Beau Brummel, the undisputed leader of British men's fashion in the early 1800s. Brummel hated the absurdly large, colourful French cravats. He introduced a radical concept: modern minimalism. He wore perfectly tailored suits paired with immaculate starched white neckcloths that took hours to tie. However, Brummel's obsession had a fatal flaw. The fabric was starched so rigidly that men literally could not turn their heads without moving their entire torso. More critically, as millions of men moved into factories during the mid-1800s, these long, rigid cravats became lethal. Workers were being dragged into heavy textile looms by their own neckwear. The era demanded a shorter, safer, and faster alternative. Out of this blood-stained necessity, the 4-in-hand knot was born, originally used by handsome cab drivers to tie their reins. Adapted for quick, safe daily wear, by 1922, the necktie was still plagued by a major structural defect. After just a few wears, the fabric would twist, wrinkle, and lose its shape permanently. That was until an American tailor in New York named Jesse Langsdorff made a game-changing discovery. Langsdorff realized that if you cut silk at a precise 45-degree angle to the grain, known as the bias, and stitched it in 3 distinct sections, the fabric would stretch naturally without tearing, automatically snapping back to its original shape after being untied. Langsdorff patented his invention, the modern 3-piece necktie. But the moment his patent was secured, counterfeiters and rival garment syndicates launched an all-out war of corporate espionage. Tailors sent spies into Langsdorff's New York workshop to steal his cut templates. Langsdorff spent years in federal courtrooms defending his design, eventually forcing every major tie manufacturer on Earth to pay him royalties just to cut fabric diagonally. The final shift occurred not in a fashion house, but in a corporate chemistry lab. During the mid-20th century, DuPont scientists created synthetic polyester. Originally engineered for military parachutes and industrial ropes, polyester was suddenly applied to neckties. Almost overnight, the price of a necktie plummeted from a luxury item costing several days' wages to a cheap, mass-produced commodity that could be slapped together for pennies. The necktie was no longer reserved for kings or rich industrialists. It became the ultimate tool for corporate conformity, a mandatory uniform forced upon millions of office workers worldwide. Behind the glossy facade of modern menswear lies a dark archive of absurd, dangerous, and forgotten truths. Here are 4 hidden facts about the necktie that will change how you view it forever. Fact 1. The neurological stranglehold. Medical studies published by the Neuroradiology Journal revealed that a necktie tied to standard corporate tightness reduces blood flow to the human brain by up to 7.5%. This slight vascular constriction is enough to elevate intraocular eye pressure, triggering chronic headaches and reducing cognitive performance during long workdays. Fact 2. The royal psychological trick. The massive Windsor knot was never actually used by the Duke of Windsor. It was an optical illusion created by fashion journalists, because the Duke used extra thick custom silk. However, corporate executives adopted the oversized knot explicitly to project artificial dominance in negotiations, using visual neck volume to intimidate opponents across boardroom tables. Fact 3. The secret poison pocket. In the late 19th century, European spies and assassins used the thick internal lining of folded silk neckties, known as the self-tipping pocket, to hide small vials of cyanide and covert microblades, turning an innocent garment into a hidden assassination kit. Fact 4. The hospital supervector. Medical researchers discovered that standard silk ties worn by doctors are rarely washed, transforming them into lethal breeding grounds for hospital superbugs like MRSA. As a result, several national health organizations officially banned doctors from wearing traditional neckties in patient wards. Today, despite decades of casual office dress codes and the rise of Silicon Valley hoodie culture, the global necktie industry remains an absolute monster. Over 600 million ties are produced globally every single year, fueling a market valuation creeping past $4 billion annually. The humble strip of silk has evolved into high-tech armor. Modern luxury menswear brands are now weaving liquid-repellent nanotechnology, cut-resistant Kevlar threads, and biometric sensors directly into the fabric. Today's high-end neckties can monitor your heart rate, track your stress levels during high-stakes presentations, and wirelessly beam data to your phone. Now look 50 years into the future. As human space travel expands and neural interfaces replace physical screens, the physical tie won't vanish, it will transcend. We are moving toward dynamic, haptic, smart fabrics that alter their color, temperature, and pattern based on your mood, or bio-integrated neckwear designed to protect the vulnerable throat during zero-gravity deep space transit. What began as a rough piece of cloth to block desert dust is becoming an active interface between human biology and machine intelligence. The necktie is perhaps humanity's most brilliant contradiction, an object with absolutely no survival function that somehow conquered every continent, courtroom, and boardroom on Earth. It is a psychological illusion wrapped around our most fragile anatomical vulnerability, proving that human beings will willingly choke themselves if it grants them power. Will the necktie survive another century of technological disruption, or are we finally ready to untie the knot that has bound civilization for 400 years? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this deep dive opened your eyes, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell, and welcome to where it began, because next week we are exposing the terrifying blood-soaked origin of an item sitting in your bathroom cabinet right now, and trust me, you are not ready for it.